All right, let's get going with today's webinar. So a warm welcome to everybody who is joining us from around the world. I can see that there is participants from many different countries and different time zones. I'm Tiina Hoffman, master trainer and exercise physiologist at Firstbeat, and I'll be running today's session, and then I'm welcoming Markus Ramstead at the end of the session to discuss some results. But today's webinar is called Good or Bad Stress, utilizing Firstbeat Life to understand your client's wellness status. And I'm going to be looking at stress from sort of a few different perspectives. It's not a simple, yes, this is good stress, yes, this is bad stress. Obviously, it's much more complicated than that. And we'll try to sort of look at those layers a little bit and then see how data can bring added value to that. The session will last 45 minutes. And at the end, I'll be discussing with Markus, and then we'll reserve some time for questions and answers as well. The Q&A box is open, so if you have some questions during the webinar, you can write them there, and then we'll take a look at them in the end to answer them. And also, we are recording the session, so you will be getting the recording afterwards. I've also received quite a few questions ahead of time, so if nobody has any questions today, no worries. I can also address the questions that we received ahead of time. So I'll start off the session with a little bit about stress physiology. What is stress and how it affects us, and sort of some general definitions. And then I'll introduce Firstbeat and Firstbeat Life and how we utilize heart rate variability data to talk about stress and to provide insights about stress. We do have actually a lot of very new listeners online, so a quick introduction to Firstbeat, and then I'll share some interesting results and cases from Firstbeat Life data, a few different kinds of results, and with the idea that how data in those kind of circumstances could provide valuable information about the person's stress situation, whether it was good or bad stress, and then what kind of takeaways they could take from that. And that's what we are going to be discussing with Markus Ramstead also. He's Firstbeat COO, and when he joins me, he was kind enough to share some of his own data, and we are going to be taking a look at that and hearing his own take on how he took the data and what kind of learnings he might have received from that. And then Q&A at the end of the session. So first, a little bit about stress. When we talk about stress in the context that I talk about it and Firstbeat talks about it, we mean natural physiological reaction that increases the body's activation level. It's like energy or gas that improves our performance in the short term. It's something that we definitely need during the course of life to get going and to get the job done in different situations. And in that way, I think it's good to acknowledge this, that we don't need to try to aim for a stress-free life or to eliminate stress from our lives, not by any means. But at the same time, stress also, when it's excessive, when it's chronic, when it happens too much, too many days or too many weeks in a row, it starts to weaken our well-being and performance. And research shows very strong correlations between different mental and physical health conditions and excessive stress. And that's the statistics show that an increasing number of people are having different kind of health conditions that are stress related. So in that way, we definitely need to take it seriously, and we need to find ways to deal with it in such a way that it doesn't become a bad thing, but instead it can be a resource in our lives. Psychologically, it's often said that stress is a situation where the demands that we are faced with are greater than the resources that we have on hand. So that kind of feeling where you have to be in 3 places at the same time, but you can only be in 1 place, or where you really have enough work for 5 hands, but you only have 2 hands to do it with. So you're being pulled in different directions and feeling that you can't cope with those demands. That's an unhealthy situation in the long run, and that's where we need to start figuring out ways to deal with that so that we can balance it better. And many ways, of course, or many keys to healthy stress management, but in simple terms, you could say that the key to that is how we react to stress and then how we learn to deal with that in a way that we can still recover. And I think in many ways, recovery is really a key, and we're going to be talking about that quite a bit today. It's not the stress itself that's a problem, but the lack of recovery. That's when health starts to suffer. I actually included a few interesting pictures here that kind of that illustrate a few typical stress situations. Here was a picture of a public speaking situation. I often have done myself a measurement while I'm publicly speaking, and even if I'm not particularly stressful about it, it always causes a nice big stress peak in my physiological data when I do that. And most people can see that. You have to be on top of things to focus and do a good job and speak clearly. So obviously that increases the activation level quite a bit. As does this crazy hobby that we do here in Finland. Quite many people, our lakes freeze in the winter time, and we often after sauna we dip in a hole in the ice. And obviously in that acute moment, it causes some kind of a quite strong, maybe flight or fright response or stress reaction, because if you stay there too long, it's not going to be very good for you, but it actually is very good for your health in the short term and even improves your ability to recover afterwards. But it's an example of the kind of situation that we can have those kind of very strong stress situations in our lives as long as we then have the tools to recover from that as well. In the background of the stress response and stress physiology is our autonomic nervous system that has two sides, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. Sympathetic is the so-called fight or flight that gets us ready for action. It gets the blood to go to our muscles to where we need it to do what we need to do. It increases the heart rate, increases your respiration, decreases heart rate variability. It's like the gas pedal that gets us going and gets us where we need to go when we have some demands in front of us. But then the parasympathetic part is the opposite, is the rest and digest system, allows the body to recover. It slows the heart rate, slows respiration, increases heart rate variability. And we need both of these, obviously. Ideally, they work in a symbiosis where we are able to switch off the stress response when it's meaningful. For example, when we take a break or when we take a nap or when we go to sleep at night. And this balance between these two very needed and necessary systems, it becomes compromised when we in a way get stuck here on the sympathetic side. So when the stress has been excessive and chronic, lasting for too long, even when the person tries to recover, when they go to sleep, they try to take a break, their sympathetic system stays very engaged and active. Heart rate stays elevated. It's like the body is working overtime even when you are trying to rest. And that obviously is not a healthy situation in the long run. And we'll get to the red and green colors in just a little bit. That's kind of the Firstbeat description of the stress response, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. But let's backtrack just for a few moments and do a quick introduction after the basic background of stress to Firstbeat, to those of you who are new to us. So by many we are considered a pioneer in physiological heart rate variability measurements. We have been doing this for a long time, 20 years of measuring heartbeats and developing different kind of technologies for physiological measurements in wellness services, regular people, elite sports, and also consumer wearables. The consumer wearable part of the business is no longer with Firstbeat anymore. It's now owned by Garmin, but the elite sports and the wellness services, we operate here in Finland as an independent business, and we provide solutions for coaches in sports and coaches in wellness services. Over 1,000 wellness professionals around the world use Firstbeat solutions with their clients, and over 1,000 sports teams are using Firstbeat Sports to optimize their athletes' performance. Lots and lots of research behind all our methods. We do a lot of validation studies in laboratories and a lot of scientific publications. If you're interested in those, you can find information on our science page on our website. But our main aim is to develop professional solutions to optimize health and performance in sports coaching and in wellness services. And the Firstbeat Life solution that we're going to be focusing on today, what that is, and specifically I'll share some examples from this kind of data. So for those of you who are not yet familiar with that, the solution basically includes a measurement device and an application. The device is called the Bodyguard 3, and it measures the heartbeat at 1 millisecond accuracy, very accurately. It's attached on the body with electrodes and detects every heartbeat during leisure time, during work, during sleep, during exercise. Typically, the measurement periods are somewhere between 1 to 5 days at a time. It's not designed to be worn all the time, but periodically for this kind of a few days and nights at a time to provide a good view into the the person's real life situation. And the device is combined with an application that the client installs on their phone, and they get their own result on the app. And then what makes this a professional solution or a good choice for different kind of coaches, wellness coaches, personal trainers, fitness coaches, psychologists, nutritionists, is that the professional has access to the client's result via our professional portal, admin tool, that allows them to manage all their clients and their projects and also see the client's results, which makes it easy to provide coaching because you're not relying on the view that they have themselves in the app. We provide individual reporting, and also the coach can get group reporting. If they're working with groups, we can provide anonymized reports for groups to show how, for example, a specific team or employees of a specific company, how they are coping with different parts and what they might need to invest in to improve employee well-being. So that's sort of the solution in short. And actually at that point, I'm going to do a quick poll because I'm interested in hearing from you guys how many of you are measuring stress in some ways, and also how many of you have done a Firstbeat measurement at some point. So if you just would answer that, have you done a Firstbeat Life measurement? And then my other poll is here. Do you measure stress regularly with some kind of a device? So I'll just wait a few moments so everybody has a chance to answer those questions, and then I will check to see what the answers are for that. Gives me a little bit of background of how familiar you are to that. Looks like I'm not able to launch this second poll, but maybe we only have one poll question then. Yeah, okay, looks like quite many people have done a Firstbeat measurement, but most have not. So we actually have a lot of listeners who have not experienced this measurement themselves, and that's good to know because I'll be sure to kind of highlight a few key takeaways. But obviously, anybody who's interested in learning more, then you can contact us and we can provide more information on that. But yeah, looks like almost 40% of the people have not yet done a Firstbeat Life measurement. All right, but then let's move forward from that. And the topic of the day was good or bad stress. So first, good to know that Firstbeat measurement or Firstbeat data doesn't differentiate between good and bad stress physiologically, because physiologically the response is very similar, whether it's good or bad stress. Good stress is often called positive stress or eustress, whereas bad stress is often called distress or maybe negative stress, some kind of pressure. But the colors in the Firstbeat graph, like you can see here, the red color, that means that the sympathetic nervous system is dominant. There is some kind of activation going on, some kind of stress. But by looking at the graph, I can't tell if the person is having a positively or negatively stressful day. It just means that something is causing some kind of activation. And the green color means that the parasympathetic nervous system is activating. There is some kind of recovery going on. Like in here, you can see that it's happening during the sleep, and obviously that's a good sign. But basically, this is the starting point for the discussion with the client. You start looking at the context and understanding what was actually happening on that day. And here is just a few examples to maybe understand the data a little bit better. In the morning, here was marked an argument with spouse, so sort of a typical, maybe negative stress response where we are having some kind of a fight or argument or disagreement. You can see a high red stress bar at that time. That's very normal. It elevates the activation level and clearly kicks in this kind of stress hormones, and the red bar signifies that. But a very similar result is actually seen in the evening when the person is watching an exciting sport event. Actually recall this data, and it was a football match of their favorite team, and their favorite team was winning. And these stress peaks probably correspond with the team scoring a goal or something exciting happening on the pitch. But by looking at the graph, I couldn't tell if something good or bad was happening. And that kind of highlights the importance of understanding what the person was actually doing. And that's why we have a journal that they typically fill out during the measurement. Also during a team meeting or planning, you can see here some kind of a low level normal activation. The red bars are not particularly high, and they're actually getting lower as the meeting progresses. Maybe it's a good, positive meeting, maybe some flow going on, or maybe the kind of meeting where this person wasn't having to take main responsibilities, they were mainly listening. But this is sort of the starting point for discussions to see what kind of responses is happening during the daytime. And on this topic, I had one of the questions that I got ahead of time was actually about this eustress versus distress, and the person was commenting that they find it a bit misleading that people often talk about eustress as only a good thing. But at the end of the day, don't you need to replenish your energies even after that? My ambitious clients sometimes seem to negate that fact, and they tend to call everything eustress. And I very much agree with that. I think it's quite common for people to think that, I don't have any bad stress. I'm just excited. I've got a lot going on, but it's all good and I'm fine. And it might be so, but that's where data can sometimes reveal a few surprises. And we often say that in general, good stress doesn't prevent you from recovering. So like the top graph would be an example of a situation where even if it's quite an active, engaging day with a lot of stress, most of the day, the person is clearly able to stop the stress response and get good recovery during sleep. So in general, good stress doesn't prevent us from recovering, whereas in general, that kind of overload or pressure or negative stress, distress, that tends to build up, like in this case, it's building up towards the evening, and it's keeping this person in the stress state for more than half the night. You can see that it's mostly this kind of red sympathetic response until the morning hours. And obviously, this in the long run is quite consuming. It takes a lot of energy to have this kind of a situation. But regarding the comment from the person that sent that question, also positive stress, it's still stress. Physiologically, it still causes a stress response in the body. It might feel better than the negative stress. It might make us feel happier, but the fact is that we still need to recover from that too. And we have seen many cases where a person who is in that kind of positively stressful, very charged, exciting situation, maybe a new job or some kind of a new challenge, maybe a new relationship, where they feel like they don't even need sleep. But if that keeps going week after week, it can wear the person out and cause burnout or exhaustion in the same way as the negative stress. So we shouldn't be under the illusion that good stress is only good for us. It still needs recovery afterwards. The optimal amount of stress is very individual, and I think this is why we are here today, and this is why many of us have so much work to do, because it's not very easy to determine that individual optimal level of stress. If it was easier, people would be feeling well and there would be no cases of overload, but it's quite difficult to identify what's the right amount of stress for me. And that's where I think that, of course, it takes a lot of personal reflection and self-knowledge, but data can help quite a bit too, because it can open our eyes to some situations. And that's what the cases that I'm going to be sharing hopefully will really clarify a little bit. But everyone needs to determine what their sort of optimal zone is, their right level of stress that keeps them happy and engaged and able to perform well, but still recover from that. If it gets excessive, if there is too much going on, too many demands, too much pressure, then some kind of negative signs often start occurring. Maybe burnout, maybe exhaustion, maybe getting sick more often, starting to feel not well. Same can happen in some cases if there is not enough demand. Particularly, this happens with high performance. For example, in sports, an athlete needs to have an optimal zone of performance anxiety or stress before the event so that they can really get that optimal performance out of themselves. But also as regular people, if we don't have enough interesting things, enough stressful factors or positively challenging factors in our lives, we can in a way get something called bore out, where we need more, something more to keep us engaged. But this is the challenge for everyone to find what is that amount that we can deal with and still manage to recover and stay healthy. And that's what I'm going to try to now open up with a couple of general cases before I ask Markus to come here with me. This is sort of a first very easy one in the beginning. This is an example of a good and balanced day. There is all the colors that I generally would like to see in the data are here. When the coach discusses this kind of data with the client, it's good to understand what they were doing. But in general, the blocks, the key blocks are nicely in place. The blue color shows that they did some exercise. They were able to get some recovery during the daytime, during lunch, maybe during some kind of routine work or easy work, had some nice social engagement after work where they were recovering. And then most of the sleep period is good recovery. It's really great if we can have these kind of days sometimes. It's not probably possible to have it all the time. Some days are going to be more demanding or have longer work days or a lot more going on, but it's good for our mind and our body to sometimes have days where things are in a good balance. This is a very different example, a lot of high intensity exercise, and as you can see, very little recovery all day and all night, hardly any green, a little bit in the morning, but after that, essentially none at all. The work day itself wouldn't really cause too much worry for me. I've seen lots of work days like this, and sometimes it might just be like that, but what really raises my eyebrows is the lack of recovery during the sleep period. And obviously I noticed that they have done a very high intensity exercise session right before bedtime or a couple of hours before bedtime. In this case, it really was a case of exercising much too hard for this person's fitness. They were in quite low fitness. They typically only exercised once a week when their kid went to a football practice, and that they found that was a good time to go running, and they really pushed it hard for their fitness level. So training effect 4.1 means that it really was quite heavy load for them. And as a result, they were not able to recover hardly at all the following night. One day like this is still not a problem, but in this person's case, their result was very similar on all 3 days, even on the days when they were not doing hard exercise. And as a result, the coach and the client decided that they really needed to quite dramatically lower the intensity of this training. It was too hard for their current fitness and for their current life situation. And instead, they'd be better off doing some walking, maybe a little bit of jogging in between until they started to improve their fitness and the recovery balance was better. Obviously, if this is a high-level athlete who just needs to do a hard training session every once in a while, if they recover great on the other days, then it's nothing to worry about. Then I would consider this quite a normal physiological response to a heavy evening exercise. But you always have to look at the big picture before drawing the conclusions. One more case, this is an exhaustion or burnout case. Just by seeing this kind of data, I couldn't conclude that this person is about to be burned out or that is having some kind of a problem. But in this person's case, the data looked like this across 2 different 3-day measurements. So 6 days of measurement altogether, all of them showed very high stress levels during the day, during the evening, and also during the sleep. There was no alcohol or any other sort of typical explaining factors, and they went to see a doctor, and they actually got a burnout diagnosis and had to take quite a bit of time off and find new routines for their work to be able to improve the situation. Many other explanations could be behind this kind of data also. So that's again where the discussion between the coach and the client is really important to understand why it's like that. It could be because they had a lot of alcohol in the evening, or they had some kind of dramatic life situation where lots was going on. But you need to kind of look at it over several days and understand also how they are feeling themselves. In this particular case, the client also felt quite poorly, so their subjective feeling was similar to what the results shown, but we've seen lots of examples that are quite opposite, where the client is not recognizing the overload or the signs of stress at all yet. They feel fine, and then the data shows like this, and then it's a definite red flag that maybe they need to make some kind of changes to that. But I think at that I'm going to welcome Markus online. Hi, Markus. Markus
Hello.
is COO at Firstbeat, and maybe we'll start off by you can just say a few words about yourself, and also when you're done with that, tell me how often do you typically do these kind of measurements on yourselves?
So thanks, Tiina, for the introduction. So my name is Markus Ramstead. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Firstbeat, and of course an avid user of our own solutions. And kind of I do measurements on a monthly basis, roughly, and kind of maybe the reason is that I'm not a person that's very in tune with their body. So I know that some people kind of intuitively feel how their body is doing, but I'm not one of those. I'm a person that usually feels that everything's fine, even when it's not. Uh, and and for me, the measurements have helped me kind of guide my choices and understand when I'm under a lot of stress for extended periods of time, so that I know when I need to slow down
Yeah,
and kind of stop working late nights or weekends,
yeah.
which is something that happens from time to time.
Yeah, that's a good background, and we will basically see that. And I think Markus's case is a good example of where just because you do one measurement and you have a good result, it's not necessarily going to last like that forever. So that's where doing some kind of a check-ins is a really good idea. But yeah, I'll share a couple of views from Markus's result from last summer, and then let's hear his take on that. But this was a result from last July. Obviously a really good result. His fitness level is very good for his age, and all the three sort of core areas of the Firstbeat Life measurement, the physical activity points, sleep points, and stress and recovery balance, they were all very good. So the overall score 94 is influenced by these three sub-scores. Really looks really good. Everything looks good. And then when I, with coach's eyes, when I look at the data before I would discuss with the client, I can see that, okay, things are looking pretty darn nice. There is all the three colors that I'm always hoping to see. I want to see some red, I want to see some green, and I want to see some blue. We can see them on both of these measured days. There is a bit of recovery during the daytime, good recovery during sleep, and nice bit of exercise. But maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what was going on around this time last summer, how were you feeling, and what are sort of the core elements that you do to try to make sure that you keep feeling well?
Yeah, this was the first week back from vacation. Kind of office was still pretty quiet this week. Uh, um, had time to exercise at a kind of a decent time at 5 p.m., which is nice. It wasn't like you end work at 7 and then end up going running at 9 p.m., which is not a great idea for me. And I have a dog in my everyday life, so that keeps me kind of waking up consistently at the same time and takes care of three kind of low level exercises on a daily basis, which is nice, which keeps me active. Uh, and I think that the 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 vacation still did its job, kind of great recovery over the night and slept like a baby.
Yeah,
So kind of what and I know that I need to be active to sleep well.
yeah,
So kind of this kind of hybrid work isn't it's too kind of stationary for me to kind of sleep properly.
yeah,
I need some physical activity to kind of burn some energy and then sleep properly.
yeah,
I think that's something I've noticed from the measurements that
yeah. I think for
if
many
if I
people,
don't exercise, then I
yeah.
don't sleep.
Yeah, many people, a dog could probably be actually a really good coach or really good motivator, because these light blue segments that you can see here, these are those kind of short dog walks. And especially when we work remotely, it's easy to have those kind of days where there is just not much movement at all. But if you have a dog, it kind of forces you to get out. So if you recognize that, maybe, for some people, maybe a dog is a good solution. But yeah, good reflection, and obviously you had seen results like this also before. So in general, you have been, you've had good recovery, good ability to recover both during the workday, especially like you said, when you work remotely. But it's it's not necessarily just because it's like this, it's not always going to stay like that, because sometimes situations change and you did another measurement, or you had probably done a few over the course of the fall, but this one here is from December. And the overall result, you can immediately see that it's not looking nearly as good. Nothing dramatic, nothing that I would send the client to a doctor right away or anything like that. But instead of being in the 90s, the overall score is 53. And still you can see the biggest contribution to the overall points comes from the physical activity. Sleep score is significantly lower than in the first one, and particularly stress and recovery balance, which looks at the daytime and the nighttime, it's a lot lower. It's only 1 point away from actually being red. So kind of like, a poor result or very low result. And then when we look at the graphs, they looked like this. I looked at several days and they were all pretty much the same, with some recovery during sleep, but not nearly as much as we had seen in the summertime. And particularly noticeable is this kind of really high red stress bars kind of throughout the day. So a little bit of background for this now. First of all, did you feel it? Did you expect the result to look like that? And also, what was going on at that time that might have been causing this?
Um, no, this was a bit of a surprise, and um, this was actually I was visiting. I was traveling for work, as you can see, kind of a 4 o'clock wake up in the morning. Then kind of traveling for 4.5 hours. I was sitting, relaxed, drinking tea, writing emails, presentations, which kind of I expected to be kind of very kind of greenish. And a focused work obviously wasn't. Then my train was late, ran to the office, which you can see as a kind of elevated heart rate, short elevated heart rate. Then kind of a basic, somewhat stressful day at the office. I actually had I met the team in the evening for lunch, for dinner, no drinks or anything, which was maybe the less stressful part of the day. But still kind of, even kind of having woken up really early, being really tired in the evening, the sleep was pretty rubbish. I think I slept pretty okay, but the stress of the day shows in the night that the recovery was poor.
Yeah, that's a good point too for those who are new to this, that the red color during night, it doesn't mean that Marcus was lying awake, but it just means that the restorative quality of the sleep wasn't optimal, and that the body was still working overtime even when he was asleep.
Yeah. I thought I slept kind of pretty decently well. The next day, I knew that I have a board meeting in the afternoon, and of course, kind of you notice the last minute things that are wrong before the board meeting, and kind of the mad dash to get everything done in the morning. And then I know that kind of public speaking or presenting isn't really stressful for me. So I knew that when I went to the boardroom, I was well prepared, and that wasn't the stressful part of the day. But I always, when I travel, I take my sneakers with me, and went for a walk after the pretty stressful day, because I know that I just need the exercise somehow to then recover. And I think that all already shows in the next night's results, that even though the day was stressful, there's still a lot more recovery in the night.
Yeah, and yeah, as a coach, I would highlight that I'm sure going for a walk was a really good idea. But then on the other hand, if you had decided that, oh, I'm just gonna go hammer do a 30-minute hard run because I need to get rid of all that stress, then quite likely the sleep would have been even much worse than here. So in that kind of a situation when the person has a lot going on, maybe high stress levels, hard exercise, in a way it's only going to make it worse. So at that times it's good to use common sense and then do something a bit easier. Get your body some movement, but try not to go too hard on that, because that then only oftentimes kind of adds to the stress load. But yeah, I think this would be a good example of a kind of a red flag, or open eye-opening result, that nothing dramatic, nothing really terrible, but really good time to kind of pay attention, slow down and pay attention. And actually that's what this graph kind of highlights, that very idea that we all will have those kind of stressful periods sometimes. There's going to be days and maybe weeks when there is a lot going on and stress levels are quite high. But when we learn to understand ourselves better and listen to ourselves, but then also utilize data in a strategic or right kind of way, hopefully we can learn to notice these kind of pay attention times when the recovery is not sufficient anymore, something is not in balance, and then you start taking small steps towards the optimal level, make some kind of corrective actions or improvements in your lifestyle, or pay special attention to sleeping enough, or maybe lowering your exercise intensity a little bit, or clearing your schedule and prioritizing things so that it's not quite so overloaded. That's kind of the key of this kind of any kind of lifestyle or health or wellness coaching, to try to help our clients see these kind of moments well in advance, so they have time to make those kind of changes towards the optimal level, which is the green line here. Because if we keep pushing and keep going and kind of ignoring the signs and ignoring the data, it's a long road back to good recovery when you're actually overloaded, when you get a burnout diagnosis, or you get sick, or you really have some kind of more serious stress related illnesses or symptoms. It can take months and months to get back from that. And that is I think the biggest value that data can bring, is hopefully to help people like Markus and others who might not be so in tune with the body is telling them, to make those kind of corrective actions a little bit earlier. Any other comment on that? I think we have good time to take a few questions here in the end, but would you like to add anything to that, or do you feel like we covered kind of the highlights of your data?
Yeah, I think that was a really, really good overview. And they say that, or we know that December is the most stressful month of the year. And it's always a mad dash to wrap everything up for Christmas. And kind of this data was really kind of a good indication for me that, okay, maybe I need to slow it down for Christmas and take it easy and reload my batteries for the spring. And then I of course got COVID for the whole of Christmas, and I spent 15 days with fever. So kind
I
of
was just going to ask you that, how did your
that
January and February results look, but have you seen the improvement yet?
Definitely kind of the COVID infection shows in my January results still. They were really kind of horrendous. And now kind of February results were a bit better. But I think that it would have been nice not to be sick for the whole kind of holiday season. But
Yeah,
it
might
is
take a
what it
while
is
to get back
sometimes.
from that. Yeah.
But it's good to know and act accordingly, because without the results, as I said in the beginning, I usually feel that everything's fine and I'm doing well. But then looking at the data, it helps me kind of adjust accordingly.
Yeah. That is, and personally also myself, my results are typically quite different from Markus's. I do struggle with sleep and getting good results, but I also check in with myself about once a month to kind of see where I'm at. And I found many small things and big things that definitely help me. I absolutely know things that don't help me, and then I kind of try to balance that and try to make good and smart and sensible choices as often as possible. And I think I like data, but I also like to live away from data at times, because I don't like to define my well-being or my life with numbers, but it definitely helps me steer in the right direction. Good. We have had some really good questions. I noticed that there are several questions here in the Q&A, and also beforehand we had questions about how can I learn more about Firstbeat Life? How could I become a trainer? What do I need to do to take this on board? So we'll send you all an email tomorrow, like a thank you email for taking part, and we'll send you the links and information, everything you need to get started with Firstbeat Life. So if you are a coach or a professional who is interested on that, you'll get all the information you need tomorrow. And then, of course, we can set up a call with one of our reps to cover all that. So just wait till tomorrow. We won't go into details about those kind of things today. There is a comment about bad stress. Doesn't negative stress impact the body harder? I would say that in general it does. In general, when we look at those kind of red graphs, the high red stress bars, probably it's going to take a longer to recover from those, especially if it's negative stress. And especially if you have, like we had that one example here that had a lot of heavy negatives or heavy stress in the evening, like in here. So it clearly takes longer to recover from that than if it's just some kind of baseline activation or some kind of positive engagement or doing something that you are enjoying. So it definitely does tend to affect your body longer and have more negative implications. But I just try to highlight the idea that even the positive stress, we still need to have the capacity to switch it off if we want to make sure that we are recovered enough the next day. There was also
I could take the question on my results. So
yes, go ahead.
Might be a factor. I'm usually a pretty good sleeper. That's my kind of one of my many talents. But I think that irrespective, as Tiina mentioned, my results were pretty bad for all the nights. So despite kind of being board meeting or not, my night's sleep wasn't very good anymore. So I think it might play a role, but doesn't explain too much of it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because the other nights were bad as well.
Yeah, the question was that, do you think the poor recovery on night one was anxiety before the presentation? And yeah,
Yes,
I would agree. Looking at those several days, I would agree that it probably wasn't the main factor in that. It's also routine for you to do those kind of things. So there was a few questions about heart rate variability that came earlier, and one here as well that somebody's noticing quite low heart rate variability during sleep. Their result is otherwise good. This is a Firstbeat Life result. Their result is otherwise all good, but heart rate variability during sleep is only moderate or quite low. And another person is asking that two people with the same VO2 max, how come they have such different heart rate variability? And I think just a quick comment on that genetics does play a quite big role on heart rate variability. So about 30% of your heart rate variability level is genetically determined, and some people simply have naturally lower and some people higher heart rate variability. So if your result is good otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much about the somewhat lower variability during your sleep time. But of course, we see a clear correlation. In general, people in good fitness will have higher heart rate variability, but there is still that genetic factor that two people of equal fitness might still have quite a different heart rate variability. So it's more the individual level that you can track and monitor that, rather than compare it to some kind of sort of universal guidelines or references. Let's see, we have time for maybe a couple more questions, and then we are going to end today's. Unfortunately, you cannot wear the device during swimming, so this is not a waterproof device. So when people wear the device all day, they do have to take it off when they swim, and then obviously you don't get the result from the swimming. Hopefully someday in the future that will be waterproof, but right now that's not the case. Yeah, I think that covers probably the most important questions from a couple of them address some of the same issues. So I think since it's quarter till, and we promised that we would stick with 45 minutes. So let's say our thank yous. Thanks everyone for joining. We had about 100 people online, and we had over 400 signed up. So hopefully the rest will listen to the recording afterwards. You'll get that tomorrow or over the next few days. And here is the information if you want to send us email, info@firstbeat.com, and tomorrow you get more links where you can get information as a coach of what you can do to learn more about this. Thanks, Markus, for putting yourself on the platform and sharing your own results and reflecting on them. And it was nice to discuss that. And thanks, everyone. And hopefully we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.